Marcus, Lucas,
John, Lucas.
how's your
Yay.
going?
All good.
Going good in the trade. The trade as always. Welcome everybody to Bitcoiners Guide, the show we wish we would have had when we first started learning about Bitcoin. So we made it for you. A little timestamp and price stamp before we get started. Today is August 2nd, 8:30 p.m. In Mountain Standard Time. And the current price of Bitcoin, let's just take a quick look at it, is 22,800 and some change. So Bitcoin is going sideways, like always in a bear market. We have a great guest today. He goes by at Duckzko, Duczko on Twitter. And his name is Lucas. Lucas, thanks, man, for coming on. We're really excited to speak with you.
Nice to be here, Sean. Super nice. And hi, Marcus, as well. Thanks for inviting me.
Super welcome, Lucas. And maybe a quick intro from my side. I've it's fun when you meet people on Twitter, Bitcoin maximalists specifically, and then get to meet people that you've engaged with online first to meet them in real life. Because I had the pleasure of meeting Lucas in Amsterdam a couple of months ago, and we got to hang out. We got to talk real Bitcoin talk. It's always fun when you can talk to Bitcoiners amongst each other. You know, there's no explanation necessary for a lot of things, and you can quickly get into like the details of stuff. But yeah, I've had the pleasure of meeting Lucas in real life. He invited me on one of his episodes where he talks to Bitcoin maximalists from different countries every week. And he invited me because I was tweeting about Belize, and he thought I was in Belize, but I was only there on holiday. I told him I'm actually in the Netherlands, and then he was like, great. Then I want to do a space about the Netherlands as well. I helped him get some of the Dutch Bitcoin maximalists together, and we had a great space and great fun. And it's kind of powerful what Lucas is doing, because, and I'm sure he's going to say a little bit more a little later, but just by inviting us, saying that, hey, can you help me out, get the Dutch Bitcoin maximalists together to talk about Bitcoin and the Netherlands and the economy of the Netherlands and how's Bitcoin adoption going on in the Netherlands. I got to invite a bunch of people and help you invite the people that you know, and you say, do you know any other Bitcoin maximalists? Let's get this together.
Yeah. And
we spent like 2 or 3 hours or maybe even longer in that spaces talking, and by doing a spaces together, we all got to know each other better. So we kept talking. There was a chat group that we got to talk a lot more afterwards. And yeah, so he's really connecting people by doing this weekly spaces in different countries. And a lot of good has come from it, more than I can mention here right now. But just getting Bitcoiners to connect with each other, it's awesome. And also the format that Lucas uses in his space is really cool. And he's just an all-around great guy. So we thought, good idea, pleb Bitcoiner, let's get him on, let's talk some Bitcoin, let's hang out, and let's make a cool show.
Yeah, and that goes by Global Bitcoin Fest, right? Global BTC Fest on Twitter. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, those are the best times when you can just get on spaces. Obviously, if you can meet up in real life, that is by far the best thing. But even getting on spaces, kind of getting away from the 24-hour news cycle that we have, that's putting all these lies that we've heard about money and what's a recession, what's not a recession, those type of things. It's good to just sit down and talk the truth and talk good things with Bitcoiners.
I think one thing that we all felt, the reason why Global Bitcoin Fest really started was there was a feeling amongst non-American Bitcoiners that there's a lot of focus on the US and what's happening in the US. And it's natural because the US is really far ahead when it comes to Bitcoin adoption. But we felt, okay, what's happening in these... What?
Windstrike Europe, right?
Well, not really, because I'm not that interested in Europe either myself. It was more like we were a group of people, well, mainly in the beginning it was Central America. So we were like Mexico, Venezuela, El Salvador, like like all over the place, and we were like, okay, we're talking to each other from all over the world, but we're not really like digging that deep. So I think that was the original like feeling that brought us together, where we started doing spaces together. And it wasn't at all the format that we're doing now. It was, we just started giving away free sats, and then Nayib Bukele did a surprise announcement about the El Salvador law, and we were like, oh, let's check out El Salvador. And they were all like, we did a space with, I met one El Salvadorian before in the spaces, Soldado Digital, and we tried to organize a space with him, and all the El Salvadorians were fighting on the space, like, you know, because everybody's like, oh, Bitcoin bad because Nayib Bukele bad, and like, you know, we didn't, you know, it was really hard to manage the space, and my Spanish is really broken. And so we decided, okay, let's just do free sats giveaways. And we did it in Cuba, we did Venezuela, Mexico, Salvador, and just having fun. And this group of plebs, this chat, one guy had an idea one day, hey, let's do a 24-hour space for El Salvador on the day when they go live. So we would start midnight and then end midnight that day.
Wow.
And that was 6 days before we had before the 7th of September. And we were like, no way, that's a bad idea. And 12 hours later, like everybody was working on it. It was like 15 people, then it was 20, then it was 30 people. There was so many people that were working on this, and we managed to get it together. And then doing the space was like, oh my God, 24 hours. And every hour, like just amazing maxis came in and just like share their story from like, you know, Sudan, Ethiopia, Greece. Yellow was on, like with Greece, we had it was so cool. So we were like, okay, let's do this every week and just like see what happens.
Almost have like reverse FOMO that I didn't hop in. I didn't even hear about that. Wish I would have hopped in back in the day. But I totally agree. If you think about Central America, I've actually lived in Honduras for 2 years, and so you just see how much Bitcoin is needed down in countries like those Central American countries. There's so many people that are unbanked, and you see a lot of Americans that dismiss Bitcoin because it's just like, oh, you know, we'll never have an issue where the dollar won't hurt us. I think that's what a lot of people think is, oh, the dollar works just fine. Why do we need Bitcoin? But you go to these other countries and they have their local government currencies that don't work fine. And they're always trying to save in some other currency, normally the dollar. And so it's really cool that they kind of already are more prepared to understand what Bitcoin is, because they don't live in this Americanized bubble where Americans, it's like unless you've traveled outside the country, or you've lived outside of the country, a lot of us kind of live in this American bubble, which is a little sad, but it's just the way things are, right? You can't change that.
No, I mean, it's nice to be American in many ways. And one thing that's really cool is that we discover almost every week like new angles to like things that are happening. Like last week we learned that in Slovakia they mainly get Bitcoin through Bitcoin ATMs. I mean, I don't know any other country where you have like a lot of Bitcoin ATMs and everybody's getting Bitcoin through Bitcoin ATMs.
Yeah.
And like the Venezuela space that we did, like that was quite a long time ago now, but it was very practical. It wasn't like a lot of theory, like, oh, you know, Bitcoin will become this macro power. And it was like, okay, the military in Venezuela doesn't have enough money, so they are mining Bitcoin to finance their operations. And like, you know, it's like really like weird practical things about like how Bitcoin is being applied.
Yeah.
Maybe not, I mean, maybe the military in Venezuela, it's not like what you want to hear as like a regulator in the US, but like it's really interesting, these weird use cases that you discover that when you're not talking to like the normal stories, but like you dive into these plebs, like some accounts hiding with like 200 followers, but like they come out and like share this like crazy story, like, oh, you know, I was I started, you know, orange pilling people in Norway 2010, you know.
Yeah. It's like this guy's an OG, right? You know, you never know who may pop in one of those. It's crazy. I was on a spaces the other day, and Lord Fusitua from Tonga popped in. And I know people have differing opinions on him, but one thing interesting that he said was there was a like a tsunami or something that hit Tonga, and it basically wiped out the electricity for their island or the islands for about 3 weeks. And he said that that Samson Mao, when he used to work at Blockstream, they had the satellite hooked up, and people could make payments through Bitcoin through the satellite. The only issue was there wasn't a lot of people. There weren't that many people who even knew how to use Bitcoin and knew how to use it through the satellite. All the other payments basically they went offline for about 3 weeks. So anyone who knew how to use Blockstream satellite and knew how to use Bitcoin were doing all right. They could go buy certain materials that they needed. But the people who didn't, they were just kind of out of luck until everything came back on the grid. So yeah, just like what you're saying, like there's always some random story that you hear from some country that that really surprises you, that you don't even think about until it happens. And you're like, wow, this is another use, like out of all the use cases, add another one on to what Bitcoin can do.
And I mean, isn't like the current most famous story kind of like that? It just happened to have become one of the most famous stories, which is Bitcoin Beach. I mean, quite random. A guy or a group of guys goes, they get some money and they start like trying to make a circular economy on the beach, and boom, you get a whole country adopting it eventually. I mean, Naive was talking about it, you know, giving him credit. I think he was talking about it many years before it actually happened. But yeah, we don't know which of these stories that would actually eventually turn out to be very significant. We've actually noticed this in our spaces, that some of the stories that are shared turn out to be like really significant later. So for example, when we did our 24-hour space, we had Abelito from Panama on with the Gabriel Garcia, I think is his name, the regulator there, the independent that was pushing the law to implement like clarity.
Yeah.
For, I mean, it wasn't a Bitcoin law, it was Bitcoin and crypto.
Yeah.
But Abelito is a Bitcoiner, so hopefully the hope is that he can use that to push adoption. So they announced it in this, they talked about it for 1 hour in that 24-hour space. 6 months later, he came on when we did a space about Panama. They said, well, we're just about to actually push it to the president for signing, because now it's going to happen. So, and we talked with the Ethiopian community like a few weeks ago, and they're talking about this massive dam that's gonna that is being unused at the moment, hydropower, and they could generate like many billions of dollars in revenue for the government, and it's a very poor country, so it would make a massive difference. Just imagine if that country starts mining Bitcoin with this massive dam that they built.
I know.
I mean, what will all the other countries do in the world? They're like, what?
You got to do it too.
Yeah.
It's the great hash wars, right? That's the biggest thing. Yeah, it really is amazing, and I think one thing that we were talking before, right, before we started recording, it's just fun to hear these type of stories and hear what people like you are doing, because I think everyone can, like, stacking Bitcoin and hodling is a great use case for Bitcoin. And that's the use case that a lot of us will do, and we won't build anything in the ecosystem of Bitcoin or around it or on top of it. But I think there's a lot of people out there, especially because we're so new to Bitcoin right now, that have ideas that are good ideas, solid ideas to start something like Global Bitcoin Fest or start the dam, right? But maybe they need to get that idea from Global Bitcoin Fest. So I think it's just really cool to see people that are building, and you have no idea, right? Like where this could end up taking you and where it could end up helping Bitcoin. So I think that's just the really cool thing, as we're so new to Bitcoin. And even though people say, oh, it's been around for 13 years, it's not new. Like it really is new still. If you look at its total addressable market, like there's a long runway for Bitcoin.
So
And
one thing that's really cool when we started doing these spaces, I mean, we're a group of plebs that just doing this for fun, right? We're like,
Yeah.
oh, like what's happening in this country? What's happening in that country? Okay, I happen to like be running most of those weekly shows, but like we're a group of people, everybody's like chiming in, doing different stuff. And one thing that's there wasn't a lot of spaces happening or talks about these other countries, but I'm noticing now that like, okay, now all of the like different African communities are starting to talk to each other. Like they're starting to do spaces like Nigeria and now Kenya and now we're seeing like a bunch of other constellations or like companies that are doing spaces that are kind of similar as well, like focusing on on these communities all over the world.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, and how many, as you say, like how many other types of topics or like angles have not at all been like, this is just, I mean, we started 1 year ago. There's so much stuff that
And you get people together and you get people talking, especially people that have creative minds and they're smart, then it just sparks, there's a new idea, boom, comes up. Someone else has another idea. And so as you get people together, you get people doing things, it just creates more opportunities for Bitcoin adoption. And I think that's one thing that I really like to see is Bitcoin adoption, but Bitcoin adoption at a for the underprivileged people. I think that's something that we don't look at a lot either, is what about these people in these countries that may be living close to paycheck, and maybe they're living paycheck to paycheck because their government currency is going through a high inflation or hyperinflation, so they figure I have to spend my money all the time. But maybe if they knew of another option, and I think that's what I always try to do, is let people know that there is another option besides saving in your local currency. There's an option called Bitcoin. And if they know about it, then you can opt in or you can opt out. You don't have to use Bitcoin. But just, I think the hard thing is when I see someone who's suffering financially and they don't know about Bitcoin, then it kind of hurts me. Like, man, if I could let them know what I know, and maybe you can only tell someone so much, right? And then they have to do the research themselves. But I love being able to give people that first bite of Bitcoin and then letting them decide if they want to go further or not. Oh, you're on mute, Lucas.
Okay. One thing that I've noticed is that we are focusing a lot on trying to onboard new people, but what about the people that are really deep in Bitcoin already? I've noticed it seems like a lot of those people aren't getting that much attention and like recognition for what they're already doing.
Yeah.
And positive feedback loops are really important. Like they give you energy to continue and do more. So I've started really rethinking my own focus, like maybe helping existing Bitcoiners could be giving more results than trying to find new people to orange pill. So yeah, it's a completely like new realization to me, like, huh, okay. Yeah, because some of these people have started doing like other stuff or like, oh yeah, I can talk to these other people, and like, oh yeah, you just shine a bit of light on what's already happening and boom, it starts blooming even more. It's really cool. Anyways, you guys, I mean, what you guys are doing with the meme factory as well is like
shine some light on us, Lucas. Shine some light, we need it. My star will continue to rise.
No, but it's like your story is really amazing as well. All this also, I had the privilege to hear, Marcus share those things with me, more in depth, like, oh, then this person said this, and then, oh wow, we chatted this, and like, but it seems so organic. It's so cool. Like when some people just get together, okay, now there's a group of people with a passion of memeing, and then boom, like, oh, whoops, we made like laser eyes. Like nobody
Yeah.
had like an intention. It's just fun. And I don't know, I feel that there somehow there's a similarity between the meme factory story and the Global Bitcoin Fest story in terms of like, oh, let's just dig here. It seems fun, you know. Oh yeah, oh what? Oh. And like a lot of like interesting stuff just start happening from the excitement and the creativity. Just love it.
Yeah, just to jump back a little bit to like adoption and awareness. What I've noticed, here on St. Martin again, is that like I can never help myself when we go into a restaurant or a venue and just ask people like, do you know about Bitcoin, or do you accept Bitcoin here? And nobody asks you what is Bitcoin, right? They know what is Bitcoin. And even today, this lady immediately asked me, no, I don't have Bitcoin. I wish I did. And like, I was like, I forgot the conversation a little bit, but the point is she ended like within like, we barely spoke for a minute. And she immediately asked me like, do you have a card? So she was like super interested in wanting to know more, but they're just missing the very practical information of like how to get it. And it seems to be hard for them to find that. But I'm definitely seeing a shift there, where it's not about anymore about like so much explaining the use case, at least not here in St. Martin. People is just like, yeah, I want Bitcoin, cool, but how do I get it? It's more of the practical questions about like, how do I get it, and what app do I need, and and that kind of stuff. So the awareness is very high, and I think with every cycle that group is growing, and it's exciting. But with me and Lukas, we've been talking a little bit offline as well, and it was we've been having a discussion about, yeah, it's all seems pretty obvious it's going to happen, but at the same time it's going to take a long time, because learning Bitcoin and understanding it and going through that journey, because everybody, is natural to look into other coins, or maybe you get lost on like, whoa, this application, this blockchain application, I can use that in my work. And then people will start putting all their mental energy into seeing how they can like apply it to like their job or business or whatever. And then they kind of go off the track a little bit towards like really understanding Bitcoin, because they think they see this other application, and eventually they'll get there, but it usually takes a long time. But it's happening, and you can see it happening. And I keep falling back to that. If you just look back like 1 or 2 years, and then you look back another 2 years, and you look at what has changed in that meantime, it's really happening. But it's going fast, and at the same time, you cannot really like speed it up, in my opinion. But there's different opinions on that as well.
Do you think, here's my question. Do you think that, so right now people look at Bitcoin and they go, wow, it's really volatile, or they have a very high time preference. They'll say, oh, it's down a lot, but it's down a lot in the last 6 to 8 months. It's actually up a lot in the last 2 years, last 5 years, compared to most things. Do you think there will come a time in the near future, the next, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years, where people understand like we do, that instead of even knowing about the 21 million cap, they don't know about the halving, they don't know about the difficulty adjustment. All they know is, look, I keep looking at Bitcoin and the number keeps going up, whether it's volatile in the short term, but the number does go up. Do you think that we get there in the next few years and people start buying Bitcoin and wanting Bitcoin because they just realize subconsciously that the number will always continue to go up, but they don't really know why? Or what are you guys' thoughts on that?
So I think it kind of like really like adds to my point, to be honest, because it kind of means that you need to go through like a full cycle to understand that this thing goes up really fast, then corrects, and then goes up really fast and even higher past its previous all-time high, and just does the same thing over and over again. And for you to see that happen, because a lot of people take notice when it's making new all-time highs, and then they're like, it crashes, you see, it's worthless, and then they kind of like put it away.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, they're like, wait a second. Then all of a sudden they hear it again. It shows up on their radar again when it's making new all-time highs again. So that's roughly 4 or 5 years in between. And that's when the moment that they're like, and then it drops again. So you're almost like maybe 4 or 6 years. And then they might consider like, oh, now it's really low again. It might do it again. And they start looking at the graph. And maybe that's the point in time that they'll start buying. But then you're like 4 years down the line or 6 years. So for people to notice it, pay attention to it, forget about it, notice it again, and start like being like, hey, this is odd, you need to, I guess for them to experience it, that's a cycle. That's like 4 years. So that will take a long time. But I do think that every time Bitcoin does this, and this has been like clearly the third time already, that group of people that are aware of this is growing. And like this last cycle, again, it's been getting so much news with now Elon Musk and Michael Saylor.
Yeah.
So that group that's aware of this is growing each cycle. And I think if you look at like the statistics of how many people, they do different surveys in different countries, and let's say it's around like 5 to 10% right now. If you look at like the diffusion of technology in different sectors, whether it was like the adoption of the smartphone or the adoption of TV or the adoption of the radio or the internet, it always seems to be like this 20 to 30% mark that all of a sudden it kicks in, where the adoption speeds up, because you have like this critical mass that understands it. And once you have like 3 out of 10 people understanding it, then apparently that's like this critical phase where if somebody mentions it at a table, there's always one person that could be like, oh, wait a minute, I can explain it to you, right? Because it's so and so. And right now we're still under that, because if you go into any, I just like to use the example of like a restaurant or a bar, just any venue where there's a couple of people together and they start talking about it. If there's nobody that really understands it, then the conversation will just die and stop there. But once there's like 1 or 2 people that can explain it to the rest of them, that's when it really goes viral, because then
people start,
when they start mentioning it.
Ask
but
questions.
It's a theory. It's my new stock to flow model. I'm going to be writing a white paper about this.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
Plan Marcus.
I'm thinking of different. I'm thinking when you guys are talking as well, like maybe there's different tools that are added to the toolbox of orange pilling. So the price is a good marketing tool. Everybody says all the time, right?
Yeah.
But then how do you start trusting the price? How do you actually know that the price won't go to zero? Well, that takes a little bit more time to understand, because maybe the real proof of Bitcoin's decentralization only happened after the block size wars, where we saw that Bitcoin withstood the most aggressive attack ever, and no competitor will be as credible as Bitcoin until they went through something similar. And why would they? It seems like they all fail and they become hyper centralized when they go through that kind of crises. So but then now we have Lightning Network. That's another like super amazing orange pilling tool. Me and Marcus have done like now 3 videos together.
Yeah, that's true.
We're just doing these videos all the time where we like
you guys need to go around the world. You guys need to travel around somewhere. And
so then like, okay, so now Lightning Network is another layer, and well, the speed is not going away. Like once you've experienced it once, you forever know that there's a possibility to receive cash without KYC instantly from someone else from the other side of the world. Okay, that means something. That's like, that's an unforgettable experience. Now the question is, when will you need it again? Like now you don't need the proof, you just need to exercise it. question is, what other tools like this are coming, like are starting to become widely available? Okay, we have the price, we have the Lightning Network. I don't know, is there any other things that pop up in your minds that is like adding to the orange pilling tools?
Well, so even just this last weekend, I was a host of Thunder Games. They were doing, they'll have every week they'll do like a new game on your iPhone or Android, and it was cool for me because I was downloading. I had a couple games that I downloaded, and every day they do drawings, and you always win. Like if you're playing these games, you're always gonna win 10 sats, 20 sats or so a day. So it's kind of like, it's almost like a Bitcoin faucet, right? And there's a lot of people, especially like older people. I know my mom, she's always playing some game on her phone. And if she could play some game that was giving her sats, like I think that's also another way to get adoption. And it's a small amount, right? You're getting 20 sats, less than a cent, but it's still, I think, just another way to gain adoption. And it's, of course, it's over the Lightning Network, so it's almost like a layer 3, right? Because it uses the Lightning Network. And once you get that prize, those sats, you can just transfer it over to you can claim it in your Lightning wallet immediately. And so that's what's really cool too. I don't know, Marcus, if you had a couple other things, it looked like you want to say something.
Yeah, I think Lucas made a really valid point there. I was talking about price and how price indeed, like the cycles might orange pill people, but you're completely right, because we had, the Canadian trucker protests. So for some people that may be a very important use case to be like, hey, it might be a good idea to, hold some unconfiscatable money on the side, just in case my government turns against me. Your example of Thunder Games, and that reminded me of like a lot of podcasters are using. Help me out here. Is it Fountain that they're using?
Yeah.
Anyway, an app where
Yes.
you can do streaming stats, right? So instead of your listeners bothering them with like ads on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, they can now just like stream you just sats. It's less than cents, right, per minute. But if you have like a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand listeners, then those stats add up, and you get to tip your favorite podcaster with like micro payments, with cents for just, and you change the whole advertising model for content. So for some people in different places, in the world, Bitcoin means a lot of different things for them. For people in Ukraine who are fleeing the country and were able to literally just transfer all their stuff into Bitcoin and get it across the country, it'll be their use case. So Bitcoin and the usability side of it, the amount of apps that are being built on Bitcoin, whether it's for payments or whether it's for games, there's so many layers and use cases to Bitcoin that, like all these things are evolving and progressing and growing. They're not getting smaller. They're all developing, and it's like this organism that grows out in all directions, and on different levels. Because even like for the corporate world, I mean, MicroStrategy has shown the world that as a company you can go on a Bitcoin standard, right? So that's a whole different demographic again. If I hear Greg Foss talking about the bond market and how you can use Bitcoin to hedge it, if you listen to people in El Salvador and different countries how they use Bitcoin for remittances. So yeah, Bitcoin is so everywhere and everything all at once, and on all those levels it's developing and growing, and those stories and use cases are spreading. We haven't even touched on the mining part, where like Bitcoin is being used to balance like the electrical grids, and and the example of the dam you just gave in Ethiopia. It's I mean, it's pretty amazing if you look at it, and just the number of use cases and just and how that's grown in the past couple of years. It's incredible. Don't forget that just a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, the CEO, was saying if you just even look at Bitcoin, you're going to get fired. And here we are 3 years later, he's offering custodial solutions for his richest clients of JP Morgan. So you're literally just seeing the adoption at all levels. And at the same time, people look at a price and be like, oh, but the price is dipping, what's going on, you know? And so definitely price is not the only signal, and people are being orange pilled, as we say, through different stories and different use cases depending on their situation and their interests, I guess. So
yeah, I think just what you're saying, like something that always kind of surprises me is when I'll hear someone who is like, yeah, you know, I got into Bitcoin when I was buying weed on Silk Road, something like that. Oh, I was buying drugs on Silk Road, and then I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Like, what? Like, how did that even happen? You know, but that is something that surprises me, just because they're just using it as money. And I guess then one day that clicks, like, well, what is this thing? And I think as if people are using it to buy drugs, which is totally up to them, and they go down the what is money, what is Bitcoin rabbit hole and understand what Bitcoin is, like, then as it's just about getting more touch points. Whether that's playing Thunder games, whether that's the Lightning Network for remittances, whether that's mining, whatever it's taking your life savings out of Ukraine, whatever it is, I think people just need more touch points. And the more that they use it, the more that they see it, the more people will start adopting it.
I want to add one more. Getting paid with Bitcoin. As more and more countries are going into hyperinflation, more and more governments are locking down those economies, implementing capital controls, as we're seeing in Turkey, Nigeria, Zimbabwe is back on hyperinflation. These people in these countries, there's super competent people there, and they can work anywhere in the world, and Bitcoin Lightning payments is a way for them to access employers all over the world that they can't access using the normal banking network, right? And I've heard it just recently talked about quite a lot. So I'm predicting, let's see if it's gonna happen in the next 2 years. It's gonna pop up a bunch of Bitcoin recruitment firms across the world in like developing nations that have capital controls, that are paying these developers and marketers, whatever, with Lightning. Let's see how big that will be. But I think there's a lot of money to be made there, and greed tends to be quite a good driver.
Yeah, I could totally see that too. And you know, you've gone to many different countries, and so have I. One of the worst things that you have to do is go in and exchange your money, or you get paid, but if a team in Europe, they want to pay me straight into my bank account, then there's a charge, international fee. Or if I got to do it through TransferWise, there's a little bit of a fee there. So there's always different fees. But if I'm doing it on a money that has no borders like Bitcoin, then there's zero remittance fees. And that's exactly what I want, right? As I travel around the world, I don't want to have to be going in and out of different currencies and getting a 15% haircut or 10% haircut every time I'm going from one currency to the next. I just want to be able to transact in one currency. I think that's something that Bitcoin definitely solves for, kind of like the sovereign individual type of person.
I completely agree. And again, I'm sorry to keep mentioning the fact that I'm now in the Caribbean and I'm enjoying it here, obviously. But you know, I go here to the ATM machine, and you know, some of these venues, like you want some ribs on the beach, you know, they don't accept credit cards, so it's always handy to have a couple of dollars in your pocket, you know. So I go to the ATM, and the first message that shows up is like, this ATM charges you $7.50 to withdraw money from this ATM, right? It's just like extreme. And
Not
then
even
on top of it,
to get a $7 drink, right?
Yeah. So it's like, okay, how long am I going to stay here? How much cash am I going to need? Because I only want to like use this ATM once, right? I don't want to like. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get a good amount out of this machine. Then the machine tells me, your maximum withdrawal is $200 per usage, you know. So if you want to like take out $400, you're gonna have to use it twice, and you're paying $50 for, you know, it's insane. It's like, what is it? I mean, do the math.
4%.
Yeah. So
3.5, 3.5, 3.5%.
how easy is it? How easy is it, right? If you just have this Bitcoin account, right? That's your world account, and whatever country you go to, Bitcoin is universally accepted, and you can pay in Sats or on chain or whatever. It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense for anybody. It's trustless. It's beautiful. So I see it happen. Back to Lucas. What I'm curious about, like we always say in this show that we're making this show for for people that are relatively new to Bitcoin or just still finding their way towards Bitcoin, or maybe have questions around altcoins or applications or how to get it. Or what do you think of, Lucas, when you think of like, oh, new Bitcoiners or people new to Bitcoin, and what would your tip be to them? What comes to mind?
I think it's touches on what we talked about yesterday, Marcus, that I think that not enough is talked about the amazing solution that Bitcoin is providing to the problem of human greed. And I mean, it's greed is also amazing because it latches on to the price movements of Bitcoin. So it's, I mean, also in that way, Bitcoin uses that. But like, I think most people haven't experienced profoundly how greed takes over the human being in a very absolute sense. People stop, they just completely morph into something else, blood sucking vampires, whatever you want to portray it as, a golem, they just I have to have my precious, people get really, 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 really weird when they're around something that is very valuable. And most people, I don't think, have experienced the level of craziness that people achieve through greed, and it's something that lies very profoundly in humans, and that's the reason why Bitcoin is so important, because the ultimate power is the power over people's time, over there, and printing money is the power of everybody's time, over everybody's time, right? So you're sitting next to the money printer, and as a human, it's impossible for you not to become golem. I mean, it's almost unique for people not to become golem in that situation. And if they don't become golem, their wife becomes golem, or their boss becomes golem, or their partner. I mean,
the person
around them just like
the person after them will become golem.
Yeah, just kick them out. You didn't become golem enough. My turn to golem this shit. So Bitcoin defends humanity against that profound kind of what
greed.
I'm thinking of a Swedish word here, so I'm not finding it, but like that thing that we're lacking in our character maybe was good, but it's not serving us as a civilized people very well. And that's why we're going through these like destructive cycles where like the rulers always end up diluting the money and destroying civilization. And maybe with Bitcoin we can prevent that impulse from destroying our civilizations, and we can actually accelerate into a more beautiful future in very many ways. And if people would understand how destructive greed is and how important Bitcoin is in protecting them and their friends and their family and the society from this very problematic feature of human nature, I think they would appreciate Bitcoin much more, and they would be maybe more intrigued to research than what it is. Yes. So we talk decentralization, but we don't talk about why decentralization is necessary. It's necessary because of human nature and the greed and what that does to then civilization and to people in person as well. That's maybe my like 5 cents. and then maybe reading the block size wars after you read first maybe the fiat standard, then the Bitcoin standard, and finally the block size wars. Because
fiat standard first, huh?
Yeah, because
we can understand
why read about the solution before you're reading about how messed up everything is today? And the fiat standard is a great introduction. Like, oh my God, is our system creating this? Okay, maybe the Bitcoin standard can tell me a bit more. And then next step, I think the block size wars is so important because it's a book that proves that Bitcoin is truly decentralized. It's the case study that can't be reproduced, or it's incredibly hard to reproduce. Once you've read that, this thing will withstand anything.
Yeah, this is why we have guests on like this, Sean, because we can sell it, but you're dropping some very heavy knowledge here on the stream, Lucas. So thanks for that. Awesome.
Yeah, this is Bitcoin kindergarten,
motherfucker.
Get those horns. Yeah, I totally agree, man. I think that's one of the cool things about Bitcoin is it eliminates the need for trust, and because you don't have to trust, you can verify everything. And with the verification, with the decentralization, what you're saying, that is what takes the human error, human greed, just the natural state of what humans do. It takes it out of it, and it just lets it be in a protocol. And the protocol is predictable. We all know the monetary policy, and no one can change that monetary policy. So it aligns incentives, and I think that's the biggest thing, right? The US dollar does not align incentives. It's I'm going to take from you, you have less, I have more. But in Bitcoin, you can't take from someone. You can only offer goods and services, or you can only do work to receive Bitcoin. You can't steal in a quote unquote roundabout way. And that's what we have with any fiat. It just creates these lopsided, the Cantillon effect versus the plebs. And that's what's so cool about Bitcoin is it realigns everyone's incentives, and the miners, Bitcoiners, hodlers, even the no coiners, eventually when they start getting to Bitcoin, we all have the same incentives. And so we're all aligned. And it's really cool because it makes you think, if our incentives are aligned all throughout everyone with the money, what can we do as humanity, as society? It makes you think that the things that we would be able to accomplish would increase by orders of magnitude, because now we're all aligned on our incentives.
I want to say something about the Cantillon effect. This is a recent thought that has struck me. Somebody mentioned that the GDP number is calculated by also services exchanged within a country, and I think you can boost GDP quite effectively just by say printing money and being able to pay for services from say other nations, and so suddenly you're actually you're boosting GDP artificially through the money printer as well.
Yeah.
Now, if that's actually the case, and like real GDP, you would have to measure through like real production of things. So I saw this graph like measuring like the GDP of the US versus Russia in terms of industrial productive capacity of like physical goods. And instead of having 15 times the GDP of Russia, it had like the US had like 30% higher GDP.
Wow.
Yeah, like the number, like the difference is just incredible. And now like, okay, let's forget about Russia and all the negative feelings that people have about Russia, but what about other countries, like countries that produce real stuff, but they're like dirt poor? But if you would actually measure it like in more real terms, where would they actually be in terms of GDP, and like how much less of their productive capacity would be sucked out? So how profound is the Cantillon effect to us in the West? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it's 15 times, 15x skewed, or like maybe just 10x if you weigh it out. Like if it's 10x skewed versus like our productive capacity, I wouldn't want to be in Europe. Like once this thing like falls apart and everybody wakes up and like, oops, I had to take a pay cut, 10x or whatever, like to like decimate my Cantillon effect. I don't know. It's just a thought that I'm playing with after seeing this graph. Like, wow, how big is the Cantillon effect on like a nation level? And I mean, we're actually fighting maybe with Bitcoin against something that, you know, you really don't want to let go. If you're sitting as a nation on that effect, they're gonna fight this tooth and nails.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's a big fight coming, and I think the biggest fight's going to be with CBDCs. Honestly, like that's going to be like the last grab of control from central banks will be the CBDCs. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. But I think we're kind of getting close to rounding out the time. Marcus, did you have any last words, or Lucas, if you guys had some last
Yeah,
thought?
yeah. Well, first of all, Lucas, thanks so much for coming on. You know, it's been great. You've been dropping some knowledge, like I just said, and you know what I really appreciate a lot is, like you said, you know, there's Bitcoin Twitter is very, you know, Western centric, and you know what the BTC Global Fest definitely does. You know, it shows you that all these different perspectives from Turkey. I love the Turkish space, you know, and these things are under highlighted often, and um, yeah, there's a lot going on in Bitcoin outside of Europe and the US, and yeah, it's cool to see, and especially in those countries, I'm always kind of rooting for the underdog. You know, I'm hoping that countries like El Salvador, the Caribbean, or whatever, you know, African nations that can benefit so much more. You know, hopefully it's a bit of an equalizer. So, thank you so much for highlighting those. Maybe Lucas, please just go for like the shill. Where can people find you? Where can they follow BTC Global Fest? What's the next show you're doing? And let's get our listeners, yeah, so they can find you and follow that next episode.
yeah, check out Global BTC Fest, and every Sunday on US time, we try to match evening time for Americans so that we get the large Twitter crowd to listen in. And we also do a weekly space that's just socially oriented, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, where the guests from the different spaces that we've done just hang out and ask each other questions. And it's some of the most interesting conversations that I've been privy to for the past few months. I really enjoy that. So yeah, just come and listen in, ask a couple of questions at the end of our Sunday show, and yeah. And I just want to say one last thing. I want to share an idea that I have, and I haven't like elaborated it that much. But what if we would do like adopt, you know, all the shit coins, they print so much money by just issuing their ICO, whatever, and then they like pump it into marketing. Like Bitcoin can't do that. Like we need to do like real work to make Bitcoin happen. But there's one thing that I think maybe we're not doing enough. There's a arbitrage between the West and some of these countries with a hyperinflation, where people make very little money, and there's some amazing Bitcoiners in those countries, and they're working on some really interesting things. And an American Bitcoiner, or you know, Swedish Bitcoiner, whatever, they could basically get a Bitcoiner in that country to work half time or full time only on orange pilling people by paying like a really small amount of money. Like I'm talking like ridiculously low. Like I think I heard from the Ethiopia space we did that average salary for an engineer like $300 or something like that. Imagine you could get like
A
that
month?
person. Yes, imagine you could get that person working like half time or full time building like Bitcoin education apps. Yeah. And
Wow.
like, yeah, imagine, I mean, it's such a powerful, like, okay, people maybe don't have $300 to pay, but maybe you could fund like a quarter of a developer, like you're 4 people, you're paying one guy to just go and build Bitcoin stuff. I just want to just drop that idea because I'm thinking on the like the tagline, like adopt the Bitcoiner, but like more like, I don't know. It's more like, you know, you get a pal somewhere far away and but not to like donate. Like this is not a donation. This is like, hey,
Work.
you are doing really interesting Bitcoin work. I want you to not worry about other bullshit. I want you to only do that.
Yeah.
I'll fund you. We'll talk about it. I just want to participate in your journey. Let's do that. Like, how much more could we accelerate what's happening in Bitcoin if like we'd have like thousands of Bitcoiners doing that?
That's a very interesting idea. That would be really cool to see, you know, if there's certain people who had the means to do that. I mean, if you have in a, you know, 1,000 different Bitcoiners like that in every country, that would be pretty insane. Talk about a marketing campaign. Well,
I love it. I
yeah.
love it. Lots of ideas, and let's make it happen, guys. And hopefully, somebody who's going to run with it. Maybe there's this guy in Ethiopia that will build like this platform where we can go and adopt or sponsor or hire a Bitcoiner like that. So looking forward to it, man.
Yeah. Again, Lucas, thanks again for coming on. Marcus and I mean, I know I really appreciated it. Marcus, not so much, but no, I had
Thanks,
a great,
guys.
yeah.
Had a blast. Nice to meet you, Sean. And
Yeah,
Marcus.
you too. Just for anyone listening in, remember that this Thursday, the Meme Factory podcast, we go live at 7:30 p.m. From the same channel, our YouTube channel. We will have P from the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. He also does host the Bitcoin conference. He's awesome. You're not going to want to miss this one. And remember, what you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, don't just let it stay here. Please share, like, and subscribe. Give our man Lucas a follow. And as for Bitcoiners Guide, episode 24 from Lucas, Plan, Marcus, and Big Sean, we're over and out. Peace.
Boom.
Keep it kicking.